If I had my way, I would say that it's moot. Why should a Christian not be a good citizen and not be involved in politics? The question is even moot. But it's good that we're going to talk about it. I saw something on YouTube which I'd like to share, a description of a Christian. Person says, it says that 1800 years ago in the 2nd century, a man called Diognetus wanted to know what a Christian was, and he asked to have it explained to him. And this is what was written to explain what a Christian is. And it says, the distinction between Christian and other men does not lie in the country or language or customs. 1, Christians follow local customs in clothing, food, and the rest of life. And yet, they exhibit the wonderfully paradoxical nature of their own citizen. 2, they live in their own countries, but as if they were resident aliens. 3, they share all things as citizens, and yet endure all things as if they were underclass. Every foreign country is their homeland, and every homeland a foreign country. 4, they marry like everyone else, unless you're like Father. They marry like everyone else and have children, but they do not abort. They are young. 5, they keep a common table, but not a common bed. They live in the world, but not in a worldly way. They enjoy a full life on earth, but their citizenship is in heaven. They obey the appointed laws, but they surpass the laws in their own lifestyle. They love everyone and are universally derided. 7, they are unknown and roundly criticized. 8, they are put to death and gain life. 9, they are poor but make many rich. 10, they lack all things and yet have all things in abundance. 11, they are dishonored and are glorified in their dishonor. 12, they are abused and they call down blessings in return. 13, when they are beaten up, they rejoice as men who are given to a new life. In short, what the soul is in the body, that the Christians are in the world. The soul lives in the body, but is not confined by the body. The Christians live in the world, but are not confined by the world. God has appointed them to a greater calling. It's very important that we recognize that as Christians, we live in countries and are expected to use kingdom values to influence and affect the countries we live in. But then I don't want to preempt anybody's talk. I know I'll have the opportunity to speak some more, so I'll end up by just quoting a scripture. I urge then, first of all, that petitions, prayers, and intercessions and thanksgiving be made for all people, for kings, and all those in authority, that we may live peaceful and quiet lives in all godliness and holiness. If there's anyone who should impact our country for good, it ought to be the person who calls himself or herself Christian. Thank you very much, Father Kmani. Is there another one? Do you have another one over there?
Yes, I have another mic here. Thank you very much. Let's give our chairperson another round of applause. Ladies and gentlemen, as all our speakers are now present, I'm happy to say that Dr. Thibaut Dako is in and is with us. I may now invite all our speakers now to take your place up at the high table so that we can all see you as you prepare to come and deliver one after the other. Please, I crave your indulgence to go up to the high table. Thank you. Please give them a round of applause. Well, Father is asking. The keynote, as I said earlier, is going to be presented by Reverend Father Ebenezer Akese. So I think, Father, rather than having you go up and down, I know you do a lot of exercise. I think with a round of applause now, let us invite our parish priest, host here at Christ the King, Reverend Father Ebenezer Akese, to speak to us on the common good. Thank you very much, Father.
Madam Chairperson, Very Reverend Father John Amwa, Dean of the Osudinary, representing the Archbishop, distinguished panelists, invited guests, brothers and sisters, good evening. Called by Jesus to be salt of the earth and light of the world, Christians cannot be spectators in building a beautiful Ghana. We must all be involved in constructively shaping the destiny of our nation for ourselves and for generations to come. If generations after us should ask us, what do we do to make Ghana better? I pray we'll have answers that will make them doff their hearts in admiration for us. We surely won't get any acknowledgement if we only remain spectators. I am to talk about the common good. However, since the topics of the speakers flow from the common good, and the common good is one of the pillars of Catholic social teaching, permit me to briefly lay out the broad contours of Catholic social teaching. You know the Catholic Church in Latin terms. So if you read number 41 of the encyclical Solicitudo Rei Socialis, which is the social concerns of the Church, that document tells us that Catholic social teaching is, and I quote, the accurate formulation of the results of a careful reflection of the complex realities of human existence in society and in international order, in the light of faith and of the Church's tradition. Its main aim is to interpret these realities, determining their conformity with or divergence from the lines of the gospel teaching on man and woman and his vocation. A vocation which is at once earthly and transcendent, and its aim is thus to guide Christian behavior, end of quote. In other words, the Catholic social doctrine places the human person and society in relationship with the light of the gospel. Thus, it focuses on the social question and gives an ethical vision for society. Since its aim is to guide people's behavior, it hopes to give rise to a commitment to justice according to each individual's role, vocation, and circumstances. It is worth noting that the Church considers its teaching, its social doctrine as part of its evangelizing mission. In other words, if you are thinking of evangelization, you can't do away with Catholic social doctrine, since that is the way through which the Church gives that ethical vision for society. If you read the encyclical Mater et Magistra, the Church as Mother and Teacher, we are told there are 3 stages which should normally be followed in reducing social principles into action. First, one reviews the concrete situation. Secondly, one forms a judgment on it in the light of the principles of Catholic social teaching. Thirdly, one decides what in the circumstances can and should be done to implement these principles. These are the three stages that are usually expressed in the terms look, judge, and act. So having briefly outlined for you what the social teaching is and how we reduce the principles into action, let me highlight that conversations about the social teaching are usually framed under 7 broad areas: respect for life and dignity, the common good, subsidiarity, solidarity, option for the poor, what Gustavo Gutierrez would call preferential option for the poor, justice, and care for creation. The 2 overarching concepts which bring all these 7 principles together are human dignity and the common good. So I now proceed to my task, that is to talk about the common good. And my approach is more theoretical, since the panelists will now give us the practical implications of this whole concept in the various submissions they make. So according to its primary and broad sense, when we say the common good, we mean the sum total of social conditions which allow people, either as groups or as individuals, to reach their fulfillment more fully and more easily. Maybe let me take it again. The sum total of social conditions which allow people, either as groups or as individuals, to reach their fulfillment more fully and more easily. So it means that the common good does not consist in the simple sum of particular goods of each subject of a social entity. Because it belongs to everyone and to each person, it remains common, simply because it is indivisible, and also because it is only together that it can be attained. And together it can be safeguarded to ensure that it remains an effective way of having things done. In understanding the common good, it is proper to situate it in its conceptual space, as was developed by the medieval theologian St. Thomas Aquinas. As you well know, Thomas Aquinas and Augustine have shaped more of the theology of the Catholic Church. According to Aquinas, the common good should be understood in terms of aggregate good of individuals, or not in terms of the aggregate good of individuals, but more than the sum of individual goods. In other words, he wants society to be able to make certain claims on individuals and to help society place its interest over and above private interest or individual goods. So when we talk about the common good, we are looking at a good which is more than the sum of individual goods. In other, if we take all our goods out, there will still be a remainder. And that allows society to make the common good a framework through which it can make demands on every member of the society. So in discussing the common good, Aquinas puts together various common goods in which human beings participate. These include domestic or familial good, the social and civic common good, the good of the universe, and the divine good, which is the common cause and paradigm of all the other goods. Remember, Aquinas is talking as a theologian. As a theologian, his aim is always to make God as the ultimate source of the doctrine of the common good, which philosophers might not approach it the same way. So again, you will see Aquinas contrasting the good of the community with the good of the individual. And he argues it this way, that all who are included in the community stand in relation to that community as parts to a whole. And here I'm reading from Summa Theologiae. He also states that the common good is the end of each individual member of the community, just as the good of the whole is in the end of each part. The common good is the end of each individual member of a community, just as the good of the whole is in the end of each part. Thus, for Thomas, we cannot talk of the good of the individual without thinking first of how the good of the individual fits into the good of the community as a whole. So when he discusses the virtue of prudence, you see him making this point so clearly. He says that he that seeks the good of the many seeks in consequence his own good for two reasons. First, because the individual good is impossible without the good of the common, or the common good of the family, state, or kingdom. Second, because since man is a part of the home and state, he must consider what is good for him by being prudent about the good of the many. For the good disposition of parts depends on their relation to the whole. Thus, Augustine will say that any part which does not harmonize with its whole is offensive. So what is Thomas saying here? Thomas is saying that you can't think of individual good properly construed outside the framework of the common good. And that might sound counterintuitive to how we think of individual good. Because for many people, individual good only means chasing after my dreams without recourse to its effects and consequences on the others. And that is why he will discuss this under the virtue of prudence. And the second point is worth re-emphasizing, that in considering what is good for us, we must be prudent about what is good for the many. And here I'm sure your mind can go straight to discussions about galamsey and all of that, which I'm sure will be talked about. So it means that in the discussions of common good, as highlighted by Thomas, acts that go against the common good are offensive. And they also go against practical reason. And the first principle of practical reason is that good should be done and evil should be avoided. So, we have two reasons why acts that go against the common good are acts which should not be encouraged. Apart from the fact that they are offensive, they also go against the first principle of practical reason, and that is good should be done and evil should be avoided. In developing this concept of the common good, we are so much emphasizing the good of the whole that sometimes we may be tempted to think that the good of the whole overrides subjective individual good. But it is important to note that Aquinas will argue that the state is not an organism that swallows the individual. Rather, the state exists in order that the individual becomes what God intends him to be. Likewise, the individual seeks the beatific vision but cannot overlook his specific obligations and duties to work for the common good even at his own expense. So that is how he bridges the relationship between individual goods and the common good. That even as you are saying that the state is not an organism that swallows the individual, but it exists to help the individual to achieve his fullest potential, the individual also, as he's seeking the beatific vision, as he's walking towards heaven as a pilgrim, as a wayfarer, must also not overlook the specific obligations and duties to work for the common good, even at his own expense. In other words, the good of the individual is dependent on the common good, And the common good is also reliant on the individual. So yes, the individual remains of crucial importance, but the individual exists in social relationships. And these social relationships bring to bear both civic and Christian responsibilities on which his activities and decisions rest. So what this means is that once we are thinking about the common good, we tend to think of it as a universal term. But in doing so, we are also called upon to remember that it exists at various levels, from the family to intermediate social groups, to associations, to enterprises of economic nature, to cities, to regions, to states, and to nations and the international realm. So if you are a Christian and you are participating in the common good of which you have no choice but to do, then you have a lot of responsibilities. How are you contributing to the social or the common good at the family level, at the association level, at the business level, at the community level, at the regional level, at the national level? In other words, if we want to be citizens and not spectators, we need to think through the demands that the common good makes on us as citizens of this country. Because the common good is both universal yet specific, it is important to note that it guides the structure of relationships, what we can refer to as a formal cause, but also as a final cause, the end to which all other things are directed. And because of that, there's a sense in which we can see that the common good can also be a moral term. It is a moral prism, a moral standard against which the other goods of the society can be weighed. I was given 15 minutes, but let me end by noting that the common good has implications for the state, for civil society, for individuals. The encyclical Mater et Magistra, the Church as a Mother, tells us that the whole reason of being of the state is the realization of the common good in the temporal order. That is why the state exists. The realization of the common good in the temporal order. And among its duties, the state has to so organize economic activity to ensure that people achieve their fullest potential. Remember, we said that the common good is a sum total of social conditions which allow people, either as groups or as individuals, to reach their fulfillment more fully and more easily. So the state has that responsibility of creating that environment, that enabling environment, which will allow people to achieve their fulfillment more fully and more easily. In talking about the role of the state, it is important to emphasize that the state must protect the rights of all its people, particularly of its weaker members, the workers, women, and children. The document states that it can never be right for the state to shirk its obligation of working actively for the betterment of the condition of the working man. And since the common good is tied to how the state must organize itself, any citizen who is actively engaged in being a citizen must also recognize its own way of assessing the frameworks with which the state operationalizes the understanding of the common good. The common good requires that we also protect and love our native land. And Pope Francis makes this point so strongly in his encyclical Fratelli Tutti on solidarity and social friendship. The common good likewise requires that we protect and love our native land. And this ties in with what Madam Chairperson was saying. We always love a foreign land, but not our native land. But if we love our native land so dearly, how do we express this love? And how do we let it reflect in our actions and inactions? And because the common good we'll do the Angelus now. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. The angel of the Lord declared unto Mary, Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with you. Blessed are you among women, and blessed the fruit of your womb, Jesus. Behold, I am the handmaid of the Lord. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with you. Blessed are you among women, and blessed the fruit of your womb, Jesus. And the Word was made flesh. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with you. Blessed are you among women, and blessed the fruit of your womb, Jesus. Pray for us, O Holy Mother of God. Let us pray. Pour forth, we beseech thee, O Lord, your grace into our hearts, that we, to whom the incarnation of Christ your Son was made known by the message of an angel, may by his passion and cross be brought to the glory of his resurrection, through the same Christ our Lord. Amen. May his divine assistance remain always with us. Through the mercy of God, rest in peace. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. So part of the common good is to ensure that you don't miss the Angelus. So I was talking about the relationship between the common good and the state. And I mentioned that the role of the state, the reason of being for the state, is to see to the actualization of the common good, to create that enabling environment, the sum total conditions which will allow people, either as individuals or as groups, to reach their fulfillment more fully and more easily. Then I also mentioned that Pope Francis stresses so well that part of the common good also means that we must protect and love our native land. Also, for the individual, remember that we mentioned that the common good offers a moral standard to guide behavior. When you read Pope Francis' encyclical Fratelli Tutti, he builds that whole encyclical on the story or the parable of the Good Samaritan. And part of it, he now looks at the individual and the common good. And he says that the parable of the Good Samaritan summons us to rediscover our vocation as citizens of our respective nations and of the entire world, builders of a new social bond. This summons is ever new, yet it is grounded in the fundamental law of our being. We are called to direct society to the pursuit of the common good, and with this purpose in mind, to persevere in consolidating its political and social order, its fabric of relations, its human goals. The parable of the Good Samaritan shows that the existence of each and every individual is deeply tied to that of others. Life is not simply time that passes. Life is a time for interactions. So the common good, therefore, even impinges on how we form relationships, how we address ethnicity, how we address tribalism, and how we see the common good as the melting pot that enables us to look at the things that unite us more than the things that divide us. And since civil society also exists to help us achieve the common good also calls on civil society to do all it can within its power, using legitimate aims to hold government to account, but also to promote a civic understanding of the virtues we need, the values we need, that sense of piety and patriotism, which will enable us as citizens not to sit on the fence, but to be actively involved in shaping how we want our country to be. So what I have done so far within the allotted time is to give an understanding of the social teachings of the church, how they offer that moral prism or the vision of a society, and relate that to the gospel values and create a certain path through which they know that society can achieve what it's meant to be. And I also explain the three processes, see, judge, and act, as how we as citizens can put into practice the principles of Catholic social teaching. Remember, two of the principles, which we can say are the overarching principles of all the teachings, are human dignity and the common good. And the common good is the sum total of all the conditions that will enable individuals to achieve their flourishing. But this concept developed in the 13th century through the writings of Aquinas and even before him, the scholastic tradition. And they related the individual good to the common good, but placed the common good as the framework through which individuals must achieve their own good. So that if you are doing things which are detrimental to the common good, then not only is it offensive, it also goes against the first principle of practical reasoning, which is good must be done and evil must be avoided. So when we understand it this way, then we can appreciate why the common good is important for state relations, for civil society, and for us as individuals. So if you want to be citizens and not spectators, think about the common good. And think about actions that do not enhance the common good. And think about how we can all advance the common good for the good of our country. Thank you for inviting me to part of the conversation. May God continue to bless our homeland, Ghana.
Can we kindly give Father another round of applause? One thing I may not have said, but that came out very clearly, is Father's own skill and tact as a teacher. He teaches at the major seminary, and you can tell why, can't you? Very clear, very concise. Thank you very much once again, Father. We're going about this public forum in a synodal manner, following the ways that Pope Francis is asking us as a church to do, which is intentional listening or active listening and intentional speaking, so that at the point, you as the audience will also get the opportunity to speak. But it begins with listening actively and intentionally, and with that comes moments of pause. So I'll be quiet for a bit as we all try and appropriate what Father has shared with us. If there are questions, if there are issues that are of interest, you can kindly note them down, and then afterwards we shall have the next speaker. So for a few minutes now, we shall just be silent and soak it in. Thank you. In a world given to much frenetic activity, it's always good to take some time off and appropriate whatever we receive. It gives me much pleasure to invite our second speaker. Having heard about the common good, we shall move to good governance. And there is no better person to speak about this issue than a man who is championing this right here in our country, is a lawyer and has made a number of interventions of key significance at various levels of the judiciary, engaging the law in many ways, is a human rights lawyer in many ways, and it gives me great pleasure now to welcome to the podium Mr. Martin Kpebu to speak on good governance. Let's give him a round of applause, please. I think as he comes in, to keep it sustained. Thank you, sir. Mr. Kpebu.
Yeah. Good evening. I must say all protocol duly observed. Yes, except that I must mention that, Father Kese was my former parish priest. I worship at St. Thomas Aquinas as Legon. And the rest of the panel, I know Dr. Joyce Ayi, when we were students, she used to come and preach at the Catholic Charismatic Renewal. So you can imagine how much we learned in those days. Samson is my senior in this field. Don't mind him, he will call me senior, but when it comes to this work, he's several decades senior. And then Father Amwa, I met for the first time today, and Dr. Tibu Dako, at least I'm happy to know that she's a Catholic as well. Okay, good. So let me go to my topic. And I see, even if it wasn't deliberate, I see the master stroke and Father Pani making me speak after Father Akese. Because when we talk about governance, it's basically what Father Akese has shared with us. It's the same thing. You can just Google as you sit. Now, even as speech makers give their speeches, you can also check them out on the internet. So you can just Google good governance and the common good, and you see the parallels. You see, very, very interrelated. So when Father started, as he went on, then I saw that, there was sense in making me speak after him. And it's also good that I'm speaking before my senior in this business, Samson. He's done it for a longer time. So when there are gaps, he can fill in. Okay, so when you talk about good governance, let's just make it simple. We are not here to download definitions and hand over to you. We have to be very practical, as Father stated. And Father actually is giving the theoretical basis. So we are looking at how authority is exercised in a country, okay? In governance, how is authority exercised? And there are a number of facets of governance. So the economic policies are part of governance. The regulatory institutions we have, they are part of governance, okay? The mechanisms for choosing our leaders are part of governance. In actual fact, the whole of our constitution is governance. And all of it, when you sum it up, is for the common good, as Father Akese has explained to us, which is that we make facilities so that individuals can realize their dreams easier and fuller. So, when we build a road, what does it do? It makes it easier for us to move from point A to point B. When we build hospitals, so that we all can get health care. If we build a library, everybody can go read, and so on and so forth. That is the common good. So, if the structures that we put in place for achieving the common good are not up to scratch, then it means we've not done anything. We've not served ourselves well. And so that is where I'll be focusing on what is gone wrong. Because if I want to continue talking about the roads, the hospitals, we've built them, we've done this, then we will not improve. The roads are there for you to see. The few hospitals are there for you to see. But what have we failed to do? Let's focus on that aspect, because that is what will move us forward, right? And that's the very thesis of Father's speech, what St. Thomas Aquinas tells us. Receive that the common good has to be achieved before the individual can realize his own dreams, his own aspirations. Okay. Yeah, so for me, let's look at the authority. Now, and even before we come to our Constitution 1992, I think the first thing we should be looking at is our own traditions and teachings as Catholics. So, in the Catechism of the Church, 1873, it says that we should start with conscientizing ourselves, and that's good. That's good, you know. Sometimes we come in and out of church, but we don't really know all the rules that the church teaches us. So sometimes I've been wondering whether maybe for 5 minutes every Sunday, when a priest finishes teaching or preaching, if he can talk about the history of the church and the teachings specifically. Because as far as I remember, it's not done in a chronological manner. So sometimes you can be Catholic, but you don't know much about the teachings. So maybe, Father, you are closer to the bishop, you should be looking at it. Because, and even when it comes to the history, I have read about popes that led wars. Popes that led wars. You've read about the Crusades, haven't you? Sometimes I feel we learn the most important things as young children. So when we grow up, we often forget. When you say the Crusades we had, some of them, the popes were leading the charges. You read about the Borgias, those popes. You read about Gregory the First, Gregory the Second, the Third, Leo, etc. Several popes. The time the Catholic Church, you're talking about the head of the church being in France for 70 years. They had to fight to bring it back to Rome. I mean, when you read the history of our church, you see that it's full of wars. Wars. And who fought those wars? The popes, but not they alone. They were just leading. The people helped. So how come today we choose to come to church every Sunday, we sing and pray, and we go home? Meanwhile, the rot is out there in the society. The rot is out there in the society. Mention Reverend Martin Luther King. He was a priest, but what was he doing? Leading demonstrations. Leading demonstrations to get the right thing done so that the black man could be what? Empowered. The black man could be what? Enlightened. He could enjoy his rights. So to be honest with you, sometimes I get angry. I won't hide it. When I just see that we go to church and just pray, sing, and then leave. No, to be very honest with you. So it's even good that we are speaking today. So Father, maybe, yes, tell Bishop, what was the last time as Catholics we organized a demonstration? Our history shows that when Rawlins was in power as a dictator, it was a Catholic church. You Google. You see Archbishop Palmer Buckle. They were the people leading. Palmer Buckle had to flee for his life because later he became too much of a thorn in the flesh of the PNDC administration. Ask Archbishop Peter Akwesi Sapon. But it looks like, and I'm happy I see older people here, but how much have we taught the younger ones? How much? So that we still have the same evil. Okay, let me take off the mask since I'm a bit far from others. I like the mask. It serves several purposes. when I've not shaven well, it's good. It helps. So don't mind if I'm not well shaven. Okay, so there is a lot of, look, lots of that. I'm not alone. I meet Catholics in church. I ask them, and it's the same thing. All I'm saying is that, look, this topic you've given me, I have just come here to say one thing. We are too docile. Too docile. You say governance. Yes. Am I the one to tell you here that some of the roads are not working? Am I the one to say today that, as we speak, 3 of the 6 childhood killer diseases, the vaccines are not available? Am I the one to say it? The experts have been saying so for 1 month now. And so as Catholics, what have we done? So you see why sometimes I get angry when all we do is to just dress up, go to church, sing, pray, and then we go back. How? And I'm very serious. The anger is real. So it's good that you provided this forum. Please tell His Grace the Archbishop that we want to go back to the PNDC days. I've had the opportunity to ask some senior Catholics, and they are saying, that time the Catholic Church led the country in fighting for democracy because it wasn't a democracy. But now that we have a democracy, people are free to choose. Choose what? So we are choosing corruption. Is that what we are doing? Since 1992. So we've chosen corruption after corruption, after corruption, after corruption, after corruption. Is that it? Then the Catholic Bishops' Conference has to look at that matter again. We want the bishops to come and lead us in the demonstrations. What they did in the PNDC days, they should come back. We don't, if some people feel, I don't even see how, if the bishops are leading us to fight the ills in our society, our own members will get up and say no, then they are leaving the church. How? Oh, yes, my brother, I'm very happy. We seem to have said the same how. Please, what's your name? The senior man there. What's your name, sir? Sorry? Nana? Nana, I'm very happy. I saw your lips say how in unison with me. Yeah, because I'm very, look, that's the main reason I came. Today, I had a very packed day, but I said, no, let me come. So these things you are saying, I should say from the Constitution. Look, when you read all the literature, at least those that I could read before coming here, they all talk about the role to be played by the citizen. The role to be played by the citizen, that is what is lacking. I'm not the one coming here to tell you that corruption is just, destroying our country. That women are excluded. Disability, people with disability are excluded. That journalists are beaten to pulp, and I'm sure Samson will add a word. And so on and so forth. You can Google the World Governance Index. You see the criteria for measuring governance. You can Google IIAG, Ibrahim Index on African Governance. Everything is on your phone. So I saw that what you have asked me to come and do here is to come and prick your conscience that, look, we are too docile. This coming to church Sunday, pray and go back, is not cutting it. And in actual fact, we are also part of the problem. Because Father Kwani sent me some speaking points. Of course, I'm grateful for that. The first point on his WhatsApp message, the last population census shows Christians are at least about 71% of this population. So today, if corruption is one of our biggest problems, can Christians be exonerated? Can we be exonerated? It's very, very unlikely. Very, very, very unlikely. So what do we come? And you see, I appreciate it. So what I have been doing recently is that I've been reading history. Because as I said, there are times you just get conflicted. You are like, look, we've been praying since we were children. Look, I went to Legion of Mary, went to as I told you, the charismatic renewal. We've been praying ever since. And we end up with such bad leaders. So I'm like, what is this? So now I'm trying to read history to see maybe there's answer in history. And true, I'm seeing something. And even in the Bible, which is that majority of us are bad people. Yeah, majority of us are bad people. Forgive me, Father, but somehow I don't remember our priests teaching that as we sit in church together, majority of us are bad. No. Rather, as far as I can remember, as a child, anytime I heard a charismatic or Pentecostal teacher talk about demons and principalities and bad people, I said, oh no, they've not had proper education. My Catholic priest goes to seminary for 7-8 years, or how many years? So when Father preaches, that is it. And so I've grown up with this concept that we are all children of God and we are all good people. So though I went to law school, that thing never left me. I see every individual and I want to embrace. But now I look at our society and I see that no, there is a disconnect. So Father, sorry, but I think I've not been taught well in church. No, forgive me. Maybe you will remind me that, Martin, I preached about bad people. I don't seem to remember. Yes. Hey, so I'm told even the 15 minutes is almost up. Wow. It's left with 5 minutes. So as I've told you, it's good. This one is better. I've told you about Martin Luther King. I've told you about the popes leading the crusades. I've mentioned some of them. Gregory the First, the Second, the Third. At a point, the papacy was stationed in France. They had to fight for 70 years. It was in France. They had to fight to return it. You talk about the Byzantine Empire. That's our own church history. Okay? The troubles we went through. All I'm talking about, fight. So I came to talk about fight because the governance they are talking about in the Constitution is made on the assumption that you and I will fight. So if we are not fighting, sorry, I don't know when God is going to come down himself and fight for us. So to come to a bit of the theory, they say, okay, governance, how the authority is exercised. Economic policies are part of governance. So I can remember Article 36, when you read it, it says that the nation should develop, the state should take steps to develop us, but make sure that as we develop, we should protect adequate livelihood. You see, protect the livelihoods of the people. So when you see your government trying to go and build hospital, roads, etc., by taking people's money, like the domestic debt exchange program, that is wrong. It's unconstitutional. Pay people what you owe them. Then the balance you can use to build roads. Do you understand? So if somebody, this example of a medical doctor who government is owed, he has some of the bonds. He needs the money to pay his drugs, etc. Government is not paying him, and government wants to take the money to go and build roads, schools, and etc. No, that's unconstitutional. So you read from Article 1 to the end, there are structures. Maybe 2 more minutes on it, and Father, my time will be done on the provisions there. So you'll find that, okay, Article 41 talks about our role as citizens. What should we do? What should we do? You heard Nana Kofi Tibu talk about how. Means we are docile. We should take steps to what? Curb corruption. Take steps, Article 41, take steps to curb waste. Waste in our public institutions. Protect all our properties. Live together as good citizens, etc. They are all there. Just Google articles, 41. Sum total of it. Be a good person. Be a good person. So now, if your uncle is a minister, and you've seen your uncle buy 4 cars within 1 year, he has built several mansions, and you are not reporting him, you are a bad citizen. You are a bad citizen. The same, even if it's your father. Look, and I'll tell you, there's a case called Republic versus Apietu, Abontindom Hine. This is a case that happened in Chebi in the Gold Coast era. When Oforiata II died, you know this thing you hear about chiefs, when they die, they bury them with the heads of people who are close to them. Yes. So when Oforiata died, Achia Mensah, the chief of Apeja, where you are going to Kumasi Apeja on that road, was killed so that the head will be used to accompany Oforiata. The colonial government said, "Nah lie." They prosecuted them. The point I'm making is that today, there are people in government. Some of them, their grandparents were involved. Top people. Yeah, let's say it. It's our history. If you Google, you see murder in colonial government, blah, blah, blah. Richard Rathbone. You can buy it. The point I want to make there is that people from the royal family came and testified against their own kinsmen. And they were found guilty for killing Achia Mensah. And 3 of them were executed by the colonial government. The rest is this normal lawyer appeal that delayed. So eventually the rest were not executed. I'm telling you that people in the office of the president, some of them, their grandparents were involved. Please, that's our history. The point I'm making is that in Achim, people came and reported their own relations. Today, I went to court. There was a case I was dealing with, a murder case. A mother and a father and a sister are coming to testify against so their son and their brother. 2 parents, they are coming to testify in court against their child. And a sister is coming to testify against his brother. So those of you, your fathers, your uncles are in government looting, and you are not saying anything. It's shame on you. Oh. It's shame on you. That's the governance. I think that is it. Because the rest of the provisions, look, you read the UNDP report on governance. Just Google it. Those are the things I've read. They say that the main problem is the failure of the citizen. The failure of the citizen. This Ghanaian docile citizen. We are our own enemies. Check all the literature. I've already talked about the issue of disability, excluding women. You see it in parliament, right? The fact that we don't want to report evil. Yeah, Father says it's time. So please, that's just it. Google. The speech is out there. Thank you very much.
Can we kindly give Mr. Martin Pibu another round of applause? He represents the gadfly in the very best of the Socratic tradition. And thank you very much for your intervention, for your submission. There's a lot to learn from what he shared with us. And as we said, this process is following the synodal method that Pope Francis is asking us to embrace. Active listening, intentional speaking, respect for each participant's views. And with that comes a moment of pause when we try to appropriate and take what has been shared with us. So now we'll be silent for a bit as we try and appropriate what Mr. Martin Pibu has kindly shared with us this evening. Mr. Martin Pibu, thank you once again. You represent the militant church in its beauty. Thank you once again. Mr. Martin Pibu said a number of things about the role of women and the marginalized and women in parliament, one of his last comments. And it seems like it's just the perfect transition to the next speaker. But even before that, I'd like to mention that we are live on Lumen Christi television, and through the Depsocom of the Accra Archdiocese, we are streaming live. Many thanks to this facility that has been provided for us. Let's give the Accra Archdiocese, Depsocom, and Lumen Christi a round of applause. And so now, we will shift from a man to a woman, and a woman of substance for that matter. It gives me great pleasure and honor to welcome the Member of Parliament for Ketu South, the Honorable Jifa, Abla Jifa Gubashi. Please give her a round of applause as she comes through.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Auntie Joyce and everyone else sitting at the high table. It's terrifying to be speaking when Auntie Joyce is listening. You can only behave yourself when she's sitting in the chair. I'm not very good at singing, but because of the topic Father gave me, I'll dare raise it, and hopefully someone who can sing better than I will pick it up. But this is a song that I learned as a child, a Catholic child and a Catholic woman today. It goes like, whatsoever you do to the least of my brothers, that you do unto me. Whatsoever you do to the least of my brothers, that you do unto me. When I was hungry, you gave me to eat. When I was thirsty, you gave me to drink. Now enter into the home of my Father. Whatsoever you do to the least of my brothers, that you do unto me. So this is how I was raised. This is how I was socialized. This is what the Catholic Church gave me. The Catholic Church taught me to do right and taught me about my conscience, that when I'm right, I know, and when I'm wrong, I know. Sadly, I don't know whether that is still the teaching. I've been missing from church a bit. But we were taught also as children to share the little that we had. We were taught to care for the poor. We were taught to care for the marginalized. I recall very vividly my father. He's 97 years old now. Yes, we've been teasing him that he's 102, calculating from my older brother's age. But his military documents show that he's 97, so we accept that. He retired from the Ghana forces, and we went to live in Medina. And he had a bus, we call it a Gege bus those days, the mini bus. And he'll go and bring children from the Osu Children's Home to the Medina Catholic Church. And families will come and pick these children and take them home on Friday evenings. And they bring them back on Sundays, and then Dada would drive them back to the Osu Children's Home. Any child who was not picked ended up in my home, in our home, and Mama would be cooking from morning till night. So this is how I was raised by the Catholic Church. And then, before I went to St. Louis Secondary School, I joined Dada to drive from Sunyani to Kumasi. And he was going to the Center for Spiritual Renewal, where eventually the Catholic Charismatic Union was born. And as a founding member, I recall also the kinds of things that they did with Reverend Father Sivers, Job Visa, Sister Marie de Rose, who became our headmistress when I went to St. Louis Secondary School. So these are the values that I had as a child, to care for the poor and the marginalized. There are lots of things that Bible says that guide me, and perhaps guide many of us who are here, to share what we have with the poor. So if Father says, talk about care for the poor and marginalized, my examples can only come from the Bible and the way in which I was socialized. Matthew talks about it. Ecclesiastes talks about it. Exodus. There are many Bible quotations that teach us about caring for the poor and marginalized. But this democracy that we have embraced has also given us people who are poor in mind and in spirit. And not just those who are poor because they don't have money or because they don't have food. People are marginalized because of their thinking, because they stand for something. So who are the poor, really? Is it when you can't find food today or you don't have something to drink that makes you poor? Is your attitude also poor? There are times when I sit in parliament and I'm thinking, what am I doing here? Because we are saying something that's in the law that I disagree with. But I'm there as a lawmaker. And I'm thinking, I have lived as a poor person before. I'm in contact with them on a daily basis from when I was a child. These policies you are bringing, which of them is going to address their needs? I'm sitting in parliament, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, and reading about luxury tax on sanitary towels. You dare call buying sanitary towel and put a tax on it and call it luxury? You think I'm happy menstruating every month? I'm one of the few women who was very happy that I don't menstruate anymore because I'm menopausal. But there are people whose livelihoods change because they can't afford sanitary towels. There are children in my constituency who will miss school for 5 days, 7 days because they're menstruating. And I'm sitting in that chamber thinking, I'm there because of them. How do I fight the system so they will benefit, so they are not marginalized? And so when I don't know what to do, then I ask myself, maybe this is not where it should be. But no, I'm going to be there. I'm in there, and I'm going to stay in there and do my bit. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I've also realized that sometimes the poor don't even want to be saved. The poor don't even want to hear the steps that you will give them so their lives will change. Recently, I was speaking to some people in my constituency, and I said that I have evidence to show that I was selling kelewele in Trinidad and Tobago. And I whispered to Samson that when we were in school, he and I were in Legon together. I was doing a lot of business and I didn't pay attention to student politics at the time. So when Martin was handing over to them, I don't remember that, but somehow I passed my exams and here I am. I was telling them I've braided hair so I could pay my school fees. I told them that's the reason why I danced. That's the reason why I was acting. And yet the people I was speaking to did not even appreciate that experience sharing was so they can think in a different way of their situation. They're thinking that I'm showing off. So who are poor? And how do we define this poverty, these poor people we are supposed to look out for? How do we look out for them? They want to hear what they want to hear. They may not be ready to hear what they need to hear. What is my church doing now? Dear Reverend Fathers, the kind of things that I was taught as a child in St. Catherine's Catholic Church in Burma Camp, and then Queen of Peace Catholic Church in Medina, and then St. Peter's Catholic Church in Usu, are different from the things I hear now when I come to church. Is that the reason why the poor don't even realize that they are poor and they need to hear me tell them about how I broke the cycle of poverty in my family for myself? Who is preparing people so they can hear and appreciate that you can also be the person in your family that helps everyone else along? Who is preparing them? So it's not coming from a politician, And so it's pushed, there's a pushback. And yet, I am supposed to be speaking for the poor and the marginalized. The same people who sometimes make you feel as if it's not your place to tell us. Maybe you're a city girl, or you're a city man, or you have a cutout for you, so you can afford to save us. But Bible doesn't teach me to be critical of those who need my help. Bible doesn't teach me to be judgmental. Bible doesn't tell me, or my faith doesn't tell me, that I should forget about the marginalized and the poor because they are not appreciating what I do. It's taught me other ways in which I can do it. And I hope that we can all speak up when it matters most for the poor and the marginalized. So we don't leave it in the hands of politicians, because most often when people see you and you are a member of parliament or a minister, before they see that you're a woman who has been poor before or a woman who is rich, they see the colors. They may see you as NDC or MPP or CPP. So what they need to hear to change their own lifestyle is blocked. I had opportunity to speak at the Catholic Church in Parliament. Father allowed me to do a sermon. And I asked the MPs, the clerk's office staff, the parliamentary staff, I asked them, and Mr. Speaker, the second deputy speaker is Catholic. And he was there and I asked him, I said, when you see me in the chamber, do you see me first as a woman? Do you see me as a Ghanaian? Do you see me as an NDC MP? When you see me, what do you see? And I ask you to. When you see me, what do you see? Do you see me capable of doing the work that I have asked the people of Ketu South to give me? And do you position yourself to help me because you know that it's a constituency that has a lot of people unemployed, poor, marginalized? And when you see me and you know that I can do that, how do you position yourself to assist me to do the work? Because you know I can do the work. So how do you see me listening to me this evening? You think it's politics? Do you think it's because I'm Catholic? Do you think because I'm a woman? Because I've been poor before? That I've been able to change my story? What do you see? When you've answered those questions, I hope that you will not wait once a year to donate to the church to reach out. I hope that you will not wait once a year to speak up for women who are marginalized. And tomorrow will be the day that we'll be hearing a lot of speeches. A lot of speeches in favor of women, women empowerment. Marginalization is beyond that once a year speech. To be able to cure that in this country is not about waiting once a year to make that speech. So I was just talking to the leaders, the women leaders in Parliament, and they were asking me about, so our statement tomorrow, do you have anything to ask? I said no. And I wish you wouldn't even make a statement. I wish that the 40 of us in that room can show real, tangible efforts being made, not once a year speeches. How is it that 275 people are in a room expected to help govern this country, to make our country great? 275, and 40 of us are women. And it's only recently that we are 40, by the way. I'm only 2 years in Parliament. They were less. Now that they are 40, what are we doing as marginalized people in the 275 chamber? We're waiting to make speeches after speeches after speeches, and then we go and sit. It's good that we can break the glass ceiling. It's good that a few of us are moving forward. But can the few of us who move forward, can we hold the door so a lot more can come through? Or because I'm NDC saying it, if you're MPP, you don't approve. Because when I say that, it's because I'm saying it so that you will look bad. No. No. There's so much we can do. There's so much we need to do. There's so much we must do. Samson said, not Samson, Mr. Kwebu Martin says that it's not enough to come to church and sing and pray. And I totally agree with that. Fathers, Reverend Fathers, these days, you need to be praying for me more. Because some mornings on Sundays, I wake up and I'm thinking, so I'm going to drive all the way to the church and sing and pray, and I can do it here. And then the motivation just goes through the window, and I stay at home and I pray. There's something that we are not doing right. You used to nourish my mind and my heart and my spirit with the kind of teaching that you did in church and all the other activities that Father Visa used to organize at the Queen of Peace Catholic Church that I participated in. I was a junior marshallan. The kinds of things that you taught us. So now I'm older, so you can't teach me anymore. But I need to be fed so I can feed. I must have more reason to come to church instead of just coming because as a Catholic I'm expected to. There should be something that should drive me. And I shouldn't feel as if when I come to church, then I'm offered a seat in front because I'm a former minister and I'm an MP now. It doesn't matter. The way we treat each other must encourage and inspire. The way we treat each other must feed us, not only put food on our table. Caring must go beyond that. Caring must go beyond once in a while taking money from us to give to the poor. Real care is that you ask yourself, what can I do to help Jifa to do what she's doing? Is what she's doing right? Is it wrong? How can I empower her more? That's caring for me. And I'm using myself only an example, but we do it for other people. We can't do well if we are not happy for people who are making an effort. Father, do the sign if you think, if the time is up. So, we're citizens who are both rich and poor, each of us. We're citizens who are rich and we are poor. We're rich because maybe your bank account is good. But if you don't care for someone, when you can't do that, then you're poor in spirit. We need to think through how we live as Christians so that the figures that was quoted by Martin becomes relevant and makes us proud. How is it that we can be 70 plus Ghanaians who are Christians and our country is where it is? And indeed, shame on us. Thank you very much.
I think the Honourable Member of Parliament deserves a bigger round of applause. Poignant and driving home a point in many ways that speaks to us across board. Spoke to me as a priest about the issues that we need to pay attention to. As always, we shall have our synodal moment of silence, of appropriation, of taking note of what it is that has touched us, has agitated us, has troubled us in what was shared, appropriating it in silence now. Our next submission is going to be on Ghana's 1992 Constitution. And if I'm not mistaken, that Constitution makes room for a president and a vice president. I have been presiding as moderator for a while now. I'd like to introduce the vice president, the assistant director of the Arupe Jesuit Institute, Father Evans Adomakwapia. Please give him a round of applause. He will be leading the conversation from this point on. As now, I allow him to welcome the next speaker.
Thank you very much. My boss, my director, Father Kwaniadi. So as we've been educated thus far, poverty has many faces, many definitions. So if we define it very well, more or less we are all poor. And so we also need to understand the Constitution very well so that we can be active citizens and not spectators. So I have the honor to invite no other person than Mr. Samson Ladi Anyenini, the 2019 Journalist of the Year, and the Joy News Far hosts. I think by the time he's done, we'll be experts in the 1992 Constitution. Thank you very much, sir.
Good evening. So because I get involved in this kind of business, in the last year and this year so far, I've moderated quite a number of programs that have discussed the 1992 Constitution and the need for it to be amended. And any time before I start, because I know how television works, I plead with the participants to occupy the front seats. So please, kindly do me that honor. I'm taking a minute of my time to do that. And those sitting at the extreme row, I think you can come inside here. And those sitting here too can come here. Senior, I'm holding the mic here, so I can ask you to do a few things. All right. Thank you so very much. Thank you. And Father, please, when I have 5 minutes to close, wave at me. I actually believe in the interaction time than the presentation that has to be made in 15 minutes. You can talk about our Constitution in 15 minutes. It won't work. So this is what I propose to do. That as Christians, we are supposed to be not spectators, but we are supposed to be citizens. The president preached it, and you have adopted it. So I want you to search deep into you and confirm to yourself that you have actually been a citizen and not a spectator. Truth is that if I decided to read certain portions of the Constitution to you, it may sound to you like I was reading the scriptures, because that's the truth. I don't need to quote the scriptures to you for you to realize that the things the Constitution requires of you to do are modeled from the scripture, so to speak. If you want, let's try. And my brother Martin Pebu started by referring to some of the provisions. So let's take, for example, his favorite Article 41 that he read to us. Article 41 says this is your duty and your obligation as a citizen of Ghana. You are to promote the prestige and good name of Ghana and respect the symbols of the nation. They're supposed to promote the prestige and good name of Ghana and respect the symbols of the nation. To uphold and defend the Constitution and the law, to foster national unity and live in harmony with others. If nothing rings like a scripture to you, when I read foster national unity and live in harmony with others, unless you're not a good Christian, some scripture rings in your mind, correct? It says, as much as it is possible, do what? Live peaceably. Now, it says to respect the rights, freedoms, and legitimate interests of others, and generally, to refrain from doing acts detrimental to the welfare of other persons. Don't do what is detrimental to the welfare of other persons. It says to work conscientiously in your lawfully chosen occupation. When the scripture invites you to check how the ant does its work, when the scripture tells you how the lazy ants, it says to protect and preserve public property, Martin's favorite, to protect and preserve public property and expose and combat misuse and waste of public funds and property, to contribute to the well-being of the community where that citizen lives, to defend Ghana and render national service when necessary, to cooperate with lawful agencies in the maintenance of law and order, to declare your income honestly to the appropriate and lawful agencies, and to satisfy all tax obligations. When you are invited to give to Caesar, pay your taxes, to protect and safeguard the environment. Now, because of the times we live in, I told myself I have a number of papers I'm improving upon that once in a while, when I get such invitations, they just fit. And I just pick one and improve upon it and tweak it and make a presentation. But I said I won't do that. I won't do any structured presentation. Now, the Bible says in Proverbs 11:10 that when the righteous prosper, what happens? The city rejoices. But when what? The wicked perish, there are shouts of joy. If you have not thought about that scripture deeply, think about it again. When the righteous prosper, the city rejoices. If you will not be a citizen, but be a spectator, you clearly will not prosper. You are over 70% of you on this land. There's a reason when the wicked perish, there are shouts for joy. Because the wicked will terrorize us. The wicked will ensure that there is continued war. There is continued bloodshed. But the righteous will ensure that we live in peace, that we live in harmony. If our lives are supposed to be modeled along Christ, can you imagine what a world we will live in? This morning, we're told of the story where the soldiers have besieged a town, a place in Ashaiman. They gathered many of the people there and flogged them because they did what? They killed a soldier. So everybody in that community is a suspect. What the law completely prohibits, those who help us to enforce the law are doing exactly what the law says they shouldn't do. We don't enforce the law with lawlessness. That's why when there was a time the Accra regional minister was encouraging a group of security, including police and army, to flog people, get them to squat, get them to sweep, and they were sweeping dusty roads in Medina. And I saw elderly men, elderly people, dressed up in the morning going to work. And because they also made the mistake of not using the footbridge that had been provided, they were subjected to such humiliation. And I sat on radio and TV and asked the question, imagine that elderly man, and I put some of the photographs on TV and asked, imagine that person was your parents. Would you do that to them? They sweep in the dust and they are moving into their workplace. Imagine how it feels. They are squatting in the sun and people are driving past and watching them. And I said, when you do this as a state, as officials of state, what you're doing is that you are encouraging and promoting lawlessness. I called on the president to call the minister to order. That didn't seem to mean much. We had just come from a time when a military officer had been killed. And we're all saying this was bad, Major Mahama. It shouldn't happen. And we're encouraging that. How do you allow officers of the law to do what is completely against the law and expect that others will be inspired to follow the law rather than resort to impunity? We, as a state, went into the Galamsey fields, took hold of excavators and set them alight. The law was very specific, and it still is. And for not using the footbridge, the law is very specific and clear. For not using the footbridge, you are infringing the law, and you are supposed to be arrested and taken to a court. It's a misdemeanor, and you'll be punished for it. You may be asked to pay a fine, and maybe, if you are not lucky, spend some 3 months or 6 months in jail. That is how you order a society, not a society of strong men. We went in the name of fighting Galamsey. What did we do? We set alight excavators. The law is very clear what to do with the excavators that have been seized. It says, get the police, impound them, and let the police keep them. Take inventory of them, and once you are done with the prosecutions, distribute them. Distribute them to the entities of state that need them, and publish to the world, to citizens, that you have distributed them. So we know that you have taken one to this assembly. Many places where the assemblies need just one excavator, and the sort of relief that it will bring to the people. We didn't follow the law. Here is my point. As Christians, if the nation will prosper, if there will be rejoicing in the city, it will be because the righteous is prospering. And I'm not referring to prosperity in the terms only of, financial wealth. Our well-being. The Constitution has a lot of things it says to us and what we ought to do. I cannot spend 15 minutes to preach to you about the Constitution. The Constitution says, for example, that the most enduring democracy is the one in which the people's economic well-being is secured. You live in a country where the people who make donations to you, who give you aid, they say every year in your country, here, this Ghana, 3 billion United States dollars cannot be accounted for. It is people who superintend over those monies. 3 billion United States dollars cannot be accounted for each year in this country. Ask yourself, how much are we going to seek from the IMF? We're asking for 3 billion, without which our economy will collapse. In fact, where our economy is now, if you have no idea how some people are suffering, some people are actually doing what Christians are used to saying about hell. There's gnashing of teeth. People are really wailing. You may have a stable job and you are earning quite a bit. But I suspect some of us are friends. We have relations in the villages, in towns. And every day they are calling upon you. Even your friends, some of them in the city. Sometimes the amounts of money they seek from you. Sometimes you go to bed and you ask yourself, what is happening? People with children, fathers and mothers, the amount of money they are begging you to give them. Here's my point. The president of the ECOWAS court, Justice Edward Amoako Asante, says we should amend the constitution. Justice Puaman of the Supreme Court says, yes, we should amend the constitution. Fix the country, Oliver Barker-Vormawor. He started this sometime in 2020, and it got caught up. Those who were denying that there was any need to amend the constitution, now everybody agrees that we should amend the constitution. Amending the constitution is good. But you see, it is said somewhere that bad people will make a good constitution very bad. If we are good people as Christians living in this country, what are we doing to avoid all the wrong that we see? This very poor, small African country called Ghana. The constitution gives at most 19 ministers or so that we should have. Yet we have a president who justified 126 ministers. And we sat and watched. At his own pleasure, he's reduced that to 86 or 87. And he says, praise me for it. So we need to amend the constitution. Because you can't always have good people who will lead you. So if you amend the constitution and it insists that you must have poor Ghana, you must have only 10 ministers, that's it. The president can't do more than that. We continue to complain. Institutions that are making losses all the time. They make losses every year. State-owned organizations. And yet, they are appointed onto these institutions chief executives and as many as 4 deputies. And if you know, from where some of us sit, some of the deputies have practically no job to do. The Constitution calls on us to ensure that these things are not done. So I agree with Martin. I've heard him over a period, and I understand his frustration. Almost every Ghanaian, there's a way to measure what is the majority view. Time is up. Thank you. There's a way to measure what is the majority view. Majority of Ghanaians overwhelmingly said, let the finance minister take a rest. He's tired. He's led us into this. But if anything at all, he may not command sufficient credibility, if there is any at all, to continue to be at the forefront. Guess what? Even over 80 MPs in the governing party did not succeed because the party itself supported the president. So the president says, I'll keep him. So what? The president is more powerful than all of us. The Constitution says in its preamble that the powers of government shall be exercised for the welfare of the people. It says that sovereignty, that is ultimate power. Of course, when we talk ultimate power in the church, we know its limit. It says ultimate power in the country resides in the people. In another verse, it says it springs from the people. And we elect people to exercise it on our behalf and for our welfare. So tell me, if what the Constitution says is what is being practiced, it is not. We have gotten to a point where the parties have just hijacked the democracy. It's no more a democracy. I think it's something like a partitocracy. Once the party says this is the way, the majority of us, we don't matter. And yet this is a nation of over 70% Christians. So my call this evening is that we must in fact respond to the call of the president to be citizens and not spectators. And more importantly, as Christians, we have more than an obligation to do that, to ensure that there is rejoicing in the city. I'll await your questions. Thank you very much.
I think we can do more than this. Let's put it up for Mr. Sampson. Rightly so, the president said we are citizens. But we have not been citizens because we have not been able to hold him accountable to what he's supposed to do. When the citizens called on him to do something, but he says, well, you've given me power, so I'll hold onto it until you take it back. So what can we do as citizens, listening to what Mr. Sampson just said? Can we still remain firm and call on the president to follow the Constitution? Thank you very much, Mr. Sampson. So as we are taking a few moments to synthesize whatever that we have listened to, and then also jot down a few questions, if there are any, so that when it is time for questioning, we can bring them up for the discussion. We are almost at the end of our program. We are about to listen to the last speaker, and she's going to sum everything to make us understand that as citizens, it's not only about just the human beings, but we also have to look around us, our environment, that for us to be good citizens, for us to take good care of our well-being, we also need to look at the physical environment. So I have the honor, the pleasure to invite Dr. Antoinette Thibodakun to lead us through the care of our common home. Dr. Antoinette is an expert in physical and environmental science, and she's done a lot of work in the mining area. So let's be attentive to her. Doctor, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So good evening once again, Madam Chair, who's like a godmother to me, and all distinguished panelists. So standing here this evening, I think the first thing I want to say is I totally agree with Honorable Jifa Gomashi. Because I think one of the things that we are failing to do as responsible citizens is to create a pool of credible voices. So in actual fact, at the end of the day, everyone has to represent a certain color for people to listen to you. And that is becoming a canker in our society. And if we don't start fighting it, very soon we would lose it. So as soon as you speak as a citizen, as a concerned citizen about a specific issue, the first comment that comes out is, which color do you belong to? So joining the panel this evening, I was so insistent. I said, Reverend Father, make sure you don't tell anybody that I have a position in the party, even though people would know. Because I joined the party as a responsible citizen. I joined the party because I want to be a credible voice, and I speak to issues that I'm concerned about. If I think it's a controversial issue and I don't want to speak about it, I refuse to speak about it. And I think that is where we all need to fight to belong to. If we want to be credible voices and we want to be Christians who don't just stand by and watch things happen, unfortunately, you have to choose a color in some way. But you then can assert your position and ensure that you are a credible voice. So Father asked me to speak about our common environment, more or less, that what do we see? And for me, I want to center my discussion or my delivery this evening on one most pertinent issue: pollution. I think everything about what we see today about our environment boils down to pollution. Mining activities, agriculture, everything all boils down to pollution. And basically, everyone has an idea what pollution is about. So it's not about the fact that you need to go and define it. As Martin said, you can Google and you get so many different definitions of pollution. But we have to understand that at various levels, it is us who are the pollutants. And so it is so easy for you to point a finger and say that this is the person who is causing pollution, where you forget that you are the one, in actual fact, who is the most responsible person for causing pollution. So we need to actually break down what it is all about. Perhaps we need to even classify it and ask ourselves, what is it all about? And the literature actually speaks to two different things. It talks about point source pollution, which is easier for you to see because then you talk about smoke from plants, smoke from industries. You're talking about all the different avenues that emit carbon dioxide. We are talking about leakage from storage tanks, fuel and gas stations. We are talking about our own household containers that hold kerosene and petrol, which we don't close properly. Those make us irresponsible citizens, and we are contributing to pollution. But more difficult is for us to recognize what we call non-source point pollution. And I think in recent times especially, we have consistently propagated the use of fertilizers, fumigation, aerosols. We spray indiscriminately without thinking twice about what we are doing. We don't even recycle, we don't use things. And that non-source point of pollution is what is really driving our environment to the difficult levels today. So we have to address issues on water pollution because we have contaminated all our water bodies. We have actually deposited waste. We have polluted our lands, we've polluted our soils, we've polluted the air. The worst part of what we are doing today is deforestation. We are cutting down our trees for agriculture and mining activities. It is said that about 17 to 20% of the global greenhouse gas emissions that we witness today is a result of deforestation and afforestation. So what are we doing? How are we going to address these challenges? What is our answer to some of these things? Let's even think the most. I think what worries me most about pollution is plastics. The rate at which we use plastics, and the fact that we consciously know that it's not recycling plastic is one of the most difficult things, and the fact that it takes decades for plastic to decompose, but yet it is the most common material that we use today. How are we going to move away from it? It is said, and it's reported, the Environmental Protection Agency says that in Ghana, we actually create 12,710 tons of solid waste every day. Only 10% of this is collected and disposed of properly. 2,200 tons of solid waste in Greater Accra alone. So the rest of it finds its way into our drains, water bodies, and public places. It is the cause of most of the floods that we see. How are we going to deal with it? We talk about soil contamination. In recent times, the rate at which radioactive and electromagnetic pollution is also going up has increased drastically. Our mobile phones, the different electronic devices that we have. One of the things that I keep fighting with people about is, why do you have two phones? What are you using two phones for? And then we also tend not to want to dispose of old phones, or we even dispose of it in the wrong way. So who are we blaming? Ourselves. We are actually the ones who are becoming the worst pollutants. But it's very easy for you to point a finger, because when someone is linked to a specific activity, then you can tie the person to it. But as responsible citizens and as individuals, these are the practices that we need to watch. So I want to discuss some of the ways that I think we have to look at addressing these issues. And the first that I'll talk about is institutional strengthening. How do we build strong institutions? You know, at the international level, it's probably the easiest because we have our UN charters and our UN frameworks and conventions on climate change, agencies responsible for various actions and etc. So we hear so much about it and we think, oh, we are adhering to it as a country. We are reducing emission levels by so and so forth. So we want to believe that we are doing our best. At the national level, we have a lot of agencies. We have Environmental Protection, we have Water Resource Commission, we have Forestry Commission. So it's also, again, the same story. We believe that we are doing it. But for me, I think the most important thing is at the household level. Every household is an institution on its own. And the decision that you take at the household level replicates the decision that we take at the community level, and it replicates the decisions that we then take as a nation. So if at the household level, we haven't come to terms with the fact that we need to recycle our waste, go back to having compost plants, go back to segregating our waste and allowing plastics to be in one section and allowing that which decomposes to be in another section, how are we going to practice it as a community? And how then are we going to take it as a national assignment? And therefore, if we are not strengthening our own local institutions, starting from the household to the community, before we even attempt to change it at the national level, I don't think we can address these challenges. It's basically what we have to ask ourselves that we are doing at the household level. So we can go ahead and have governments that go ahead and do all sorts of very fancy and interesting policies. And the government has done some. So there's a lot about enhancing forest carbon stocks. We talk about Green Ghana, which we are doing every year to plant trees. But how many people outside maybe their workspace or formal institution actually go ahead to plant a tree, look after the tree, and ensure that the tree stays alive and contributes to the national agenda of tree planting? I think that is where we are lacking. So we have to address institutional strengthening, starting from the household level, starting from that basic level, because if we do it only at the national level, we would lose the focus. You would do it at the national level, you do it at the international level, but if at the household and as individuals, we don't pick up and understand what is happening, it will fail, it won't work. The second thing I want to talk about is how regulatory and policy implementation processes in our country consistently is fraught with challenges. For me, I think the main thing about this is advocacy, education, and how we don't like to break down the message. And that's why I really applaud Father for, doing this essentially very important forum. How are we carrying the message, Father? And I think you should think about how we replicate this on different platforms. How do we carry the message? There's always this adage about a prophet not being accepted in your own country. And I think that's one thing. When we switch on TV and the Minister of Environment is speaking, because he's the Minister of Environment, believe me, you listen to him with a pinch of salt. But supposing you would hear Father Akesi speaking about environment for the first time, you may want to wonder, why has he decided to speak about environment? This is time for me to listen to. Maybe there's something about it that he's going to say that I want to hear. And I think that is the duty we are called to as Christians. That if you have knowledge about such issues, you share it. I always ask people, when sometimes I go for research work, I ask them that you are asking me to go and collect data on climate change. How do I explain climate change to the average Ghanaian farmer, the household farmer? Because it's a female-headed household. She's being affected by climate change. We are talking about inconsistent rainfall, changing weather patterns. And for a lot of these smallholder farmers who depend solely on rain-fed agriculture, it has a lot of implications for them. Their farming systems, the poverty cycles. But how do you explain that complicated word climate change to her? How do you explain to the scrap dealer that your consistent burning of the scrap is what is destroying the ozone layer? How do we explain some of these things? And I think that is a charge that we have as Christians, that we start putting it in simple language, breaking it down, and ensuring that our streams of advocacy carries these messages. Otherwise, we can't protect our environment together. And then, of course, the elephant in the room, bribery and corrupt practices. As for that, I would say we have all fallen short of it. We build in waterways, we look blindly. In fact, even if you are not the one building in waterways, you have friends who have built in waterways. So are we saying we don't visit them? We don't admire their beautiful homes? We don't tell them that where you have built is wrongly? Some of us have the power of the pen to either authorize or to ask somebody to say that, don't build in that space. But we find it so difficult to do that. Why? And I think that's also another way which we have to learn to address the challenge. That we have to stand up to these things. That we have to stand up to waste that is being disposed of in the wrong manner. We see it on a daily, consistent basis. But we don't speak up. If we are 71% Christians in Ghana, and we all start speaking up against illegal mining, against bad waste disposal, against all the practices that we see is very well destroying our environment, we are definitely a force to reckon with. But if we don't speak about it, and we don't educate and advocate and ensure that the policies and the things that are being implemented is going in the right channel, then we've also failed as responsible citizens. And then finally, I want to mention practice what we preach. I think it's one of the most difficult things. I've always been fascinated when I visit Kenya. Even before you enter the hotel, if you put bubble wrap around your suitcase, you have to take the bubble wrap off. In August 2017, Kenya banned plastic use there. And yes, there's some undercover plastic use, but they have managed to do it. So there's always this question that I ask myself: who is going to take the bull by the horns and understand that as long as over 60% of the waste generated in Ghana is plastic and it finds its way into our oceans, we are just solving one problem by what? By creating another problem. And then I ask myself, where are the days when we used to use more cane baskets than plastic baskets, or take baskets to the market? If you go to the market today, I'm telling you, you can just count off the top of your finger the number of people who take a basket. Every single person is holding a plastic bag. And it's amazing that sometimes even the market women selling themselves, when you tell them that I don't want a bag, they get angry. And then they push the thing in front of you like, if you don't take a bag, jinakwe. You know, it's interesting. That is our society today. People find it strange when you decide, I don't want a bag, I will carry it. But this is where we all have to go. We have to find a way of practicing what we preach. And then I kind of disagree with this whole context of let's blame everything on president, let's blame everything on leader. We ourselves are citizens. Are we going to always choose a color? I keep speaking to media people and I tell them, I said, I'm very happy with the way you pick on the practices that are not being done properly. But I also want you to use your media channels to talk about the ways we can solve it. And therefore, if you want people who are involved in illegal mining and etc., can you speak to it? When we are talking about bad waste practices and bad waste disposal practices, can we speak to it? And can we keep speaking to it on a consistent basis to keep drawing people's minds to it? Because if we don't do it, then we've lost the fight. We can't protect our environment if we all don't make a conscious effort to keep speaking in the same tune. So are we going to speak to pollution in that same way, whereby we criticize government, we criticize those in power alone, or we are going to speak to it in a constructive way that says that this is where I think we should be going, this is what I think we should be doing, this is where as a citizen I believe that these are the steps that we should take. For me, that is what we are not doing differently. And I think we will answer for it, because I had so many Bible quotations here. But I think the one I want to emphasize on the most is Revelations 11:18. It says, the nations were angry, and your wrath has come. The time has come for judging the dead, and for rewarding your servants, the prophets, and your saints, and those who reverence your name, both small and great, and for destroying those who destroy the earth. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Let's keep appreciating her with a hand of applause. She's done wonderfully well. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So pollution is everywhere, and if we can tackle it, we must start from our homes. We must educate others, and also we must advocate for a clean environment so that the common good can be achieved. Thank you very much, our distinguished speakers. We've all done a wonderful job tonight. We've been listening. Now we want to have a bit of something that is more relaxing. So we call on our brother Ben to give us a short musical interlude whilst we reflect on whatever that we have listened to, and then jot down our questions. Afterwards, we will open the floor for a short discussion. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, our brother Ben, for this beautiful musical interlude. We've been listening for close to 2 hours now. Now we want to give ourselves the opportunity to ask our questions, and then we will turn to our speakers to respond to our questions. So to kind of make it a bit faster, we will go according to speakers. So if we have questions, we will take 3 questions for each speaker. So we will begin with Reverend Father Ebenezer Akese, PhD. If we have questions for him, 3 questions, and then he will address them, then we will go accordingly, just like that. So if any has a question, or if you have questions. Okay, so our questions can go to any of the speakers. So if we have a question, we can just raise our hands and then. All right.
Thank you very much. My name is Andrews, and my question goes to Mr. Sampson. I want to ask this question. The people that the soldiers brutalized this morning, in one of the radio stations, an expert somehow was called, and he somehow justified the beating of the soldiers. And it says that there is a rule in the for the soldiers that if you touch one, you touch all. So for that reason, he was justifying that. I want to ask to you, is it justified, even though you have said something? And the second question said, will you say that at this moment we are living in a country of lawlessness? If yes, what do you think is the cause? Thank you very much.
We take two more, then we will start answering. I think.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Gilbert. I'd like to share an opinion and a few thoughts that are emanated from what I've heard. I'm really excited to be here. We have discussions among friends. I drink my Guinness and they drink their club. And we ask ourselves, are we the only people discussing these issues? I want to position that if we need to move out of the situation we are in and to be active citizens, it starts from our legitimate representatives in the House of Parliament. I want to position that the minorities in any government, whether NPP, NDC, QRS, totally immaterial, have not lived up to the responsibility of holding government accountable. We take the haircut and the debt issues recently. The Attorney General made it clear it is illegal in the process. Who has spoken to it? We are here. Many other things happen. There's one district, one hospital. It was on air a few weeks ago. Contractors have been paid, not in Ghana cedis, in United States dollars by the millions. They've just cleared the land. There's not any construction work. And we ask ourselves, so does the minority say they were not aware that this was happening and they are now complaining? Or did the members of parliament, even of the majority in government, were they not aware? And are they not citizens? And is that not their core responsibility to ensure that the common good is happening and the pursuit of it? So we ask ordinary citizens like you and I to come out into the public space and be a citizen, only to be killed physically, emotionally, spiritually, financially, and nobody will come up to support you in these times when you are being crushed. And there are many individuals who have been through this and have decided, I will not talk again. If Parliament and our members of Parliament themselves, in quotes, are afraid to speak for the public good, then where lies the future of this country? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. I'm Letitia Pia. I have a question and some comments. The first question goes to Samson. The example you gave about the footbridge and what happened to them. How are we supposed to know what to do when we are not being educated on what we need to do? Because if I were one of them, I could challenge them and say, you have to take me to court. But how am I supposed to know when there's very little education for the public? That is the question. The comment I would want to make in reference to Honorable's presentation about caring for the poor, I think that what came to mind was the prodigal son. He came to the realization that he had poverty in his choices, and so he came back. So there's actually something that he also did. I think we have poverty in our actions, poverty in knowledge, poverty in the choices that we make. We make it appear as if poverty is one-sided, but the prodigal son also took a step. And I think it is an important part of poverty that we do not look at. We talk about helping the poor, but we do not talk about what they need to do, as was rightly said, to also help themselves, because there is a give and take. The other comment I want to make in all this governance and common good with the human dignity is, how do we look at enlightened self-interest and selfishness? Because enlightened self-interest actually acknowledges that in serving the interest of others, you ultimately serve yourself. But I realized in a national discourse that when something affects you, then you talk about it. Everybody else is quiet. Debt exchange, and so those who have bonds are talking. Street children, nobody talks about them. Child marriage, nobody talks about. And they don't have the mic, and so they cannot speak for themselves. And so we really have to look at how the church can help us with enlightened self-interest. My last comment is, yes, I come to church, I listen to the homily, I listen to all that. But in my mind, the church teaches us the principles, but it does not help us to apply the principles. The principles are universal, applications are different in various sectors, and I think the church is not helping us to apply the principles. We always listen to the principles, but we are not applying them. So that's my question and my comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So.
Thank you very much. My name is Emmanuel. I really appreciate this opportunity. I've been a Catholic since I was young, but along the line, sometimes there are certain positions that the church takes that sometimes you just feel like you don't want to belong. A very critical one is the issue of the National Cathedral. I think that from the onset, with all that has happened with the National Cathedral, nothing makes sense. From the destruction of the buildings to the importation of a stone from Israel, and the amount of money we have spent so far. And just looking at what the country is going through at the moment, the fact that we don't even have child vaccines, and when you look at the amount of money we have sunk into this project, and the fact that we cannot even afford vaccines for children at this material moment, you know, it kind of saddens me. I remember there was one time, John Kerry, he stood for abortion rights one time, and when he went to church and he went to mass during communion time, the priest refused to give him communion. The priest took a stand at that time, and I think that we have reached a position in this country, and we need to take a stand. And I really applaud the fact that we do have something like this, and the Jesuits are saying that we cannot separate action for justice and liberation for oppression from the proclamation of the word of God. And Ms. Joyce, I grew up respecting you. I admire you a lot. It's a lot of things that you have done that I really appreciate. But don't you think that at this material moment, yes, I think at this material moment, don't you think it would be appropriate to resign from the National Cathedral with all that is surrounding it, especially within this context? Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. So, Mr. Sampson, maybe you may want to have the microphone up there. Yeah.
All right, thank you. And time is fast spent, so pardon me if I go about my responses this way. Number one, you listen to someone on radio justifying the military lawlessness, and you're asking me if it can be justified. I didn't listen, but if somebody did that, clearly, citizen arrest. If somebody does wrong, something that is criminal, you can effect the arrest, but the law says hand them to the nearest police station or police officer. What's the purpose? So that they will be taken through due process. Check this. You may have gotten the wrong person and beat them to death, only to realize that they were innocent. So that's why they are supposed to go before a court and then show if indeed the thing they are accused of, they've actually done it or they have not. So not even the president, the primus inter pares, the first among equals in the country, has the right to lift a finger on anybody in the name of the person having done a crime. The Constitution says nothing is a crime unless the law prescribes it and prescribes the punishment. And we have law enforcement agencies to do that job. So thank you. You say, are we living in a state of lawlessness? Absolutely not. There are excesses. I needed to use examples so that you could appreciate what I'm saying. If I came here and stood and just read the Constitution to you, it would make no sense. There are excesses. Yes, sometimes we, and particularly in the media is very guilty of this. We take the small wrong, not the small wrong, the wrong in the small corner, and then spread it across as if that is what is going on all over the place. It's not correct. Like we say, politicians are thieves. You hear that, right? There are politicians who will not take your kobo. You know, even where they have the opportunity to steal it, to take it, they won't. There are politicians who will bring you change on their per diem. You heard the story about Martin Amidu. He traveled, he came back with per diem, handed it over. There are people like that. He's not alone. But we know they are bad ones. Let's call them for who they are. But let's not overgeneralize. And finally, you say there's little education about, so people don't know their rights, to insist on them. You see, when officialdom is doing the wrong thing, the ordinary person is powerless. So some of them, they actually do speak up. These people we heard on radio today, who were being flogged by the soldiers, we heard them, some of them challenge them. But at what cost? They are afraid that they will be shot to death. Some of them still spoke up, but they were still beaten. When officialdom is not heard consistently condemning these things, they will continue to happen. So particularly, unfortunately, this is the country we live in, this is the system we live in. The president must be heard denouncing these things as repeatedly as he can, because people will listen. But the NCC has a job. We don't cry and support them. They are hardly giving any money. We give all the money to Electoral Commission. We give the Electoral Commission millions of dollars. We don't give $1 million to the NCC. Meanwhile, they are the ones supposed to go around all over the country and educate us about our basic rights. And we are also part of the problem. The media is engaged, is supposed to educate. When the media is doing things that have educational value, we tune off. We are interested in the, political fights, the insult fest, people insulting each other. So I'm doing a program on the law. I call it the law, just educating people, free. My education as a lawyer, I'm just giving it for free. Bring my colleague lawyers on my show to just educate people. People are not interested. They would rather watch, they know me on Newsfile. They don't know that I have another show. millions will watch and tune in to watch Newsfile, but a few hundreds will tune in to, that show. So we are part of the problem.
Yeah, I think those are the questions so far. You have a question? Oh, okay. The last.
I'm not sure, madam, I'm not sure that was a question. It was a comment, wasn't it? Yes. So for me, it was a comment.
So the last round of questions.
He asked a question. Don't you think? No, I don't think. You asked me whether I didn't think I should. I don't think I should. That's my answer. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Anan Moite, and a Christian, not a Catholic, but a Christian. And it is very difficult in this area to be a citizen. Because I'm even sad when Madam was giving me a presentation. And it looked like we shouldn't blame the president. We should blame ourselves, because we are the cause. I mean, you have to start it from home. We have to start it from home. But, and they talk about this, but Madam, are you in this country when a group of women went on demonstration at Togo Embassy runabout that a tree should not be cut down, which is older than Ghana, but the government end up cutting the tree and put somebody's father's head? You see, we are living in an era like where the Roman Empire took over Jerusalem. When the priests and then the noble are connected to the empire, so they can do anything they want, they cannot be caught. But if you are ordinary Jew, like Paul was arrested and abused, and later you have to say that, oh, I'm a Roman citizen, before they are afraid, because they know that when the government, when the government heard it, it's going to be a persecution. So it's difficult. You see, even to go to campaign, my brothers are pastors, and to go to a demonstration, kind of text message they will send to me that you don't have to go. It's not a Christian. You don't have to do this. You have to wait. All that. So it's very difficult to be a citizen.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We will wish to emphasize that as much as possible, we should try not to personalize issues. And so much as we have very pertinent issues that we want to bring up, it's better that we are broad in our analysis without personalizing issues. Thank you very much for the contributions you've made so far. I think we would like to say a big thank you to the Vice President, the Assistant Director of the Arupe Jesuit Institute, for leading this part of the conversation. Please give Father Evans, stay with me. I feel confident having him around. We will now turn to the special guest representing the Archbishop of Accra for comments from him, and then we'll have the last concluding remarks from the chairperson. So let's give our special guest, Father John Amwa, a round of applause. Thank you.
So I bring you greetings from His Grace, Most Reverend John Bonaventure Kofi, the Metropolitan Archbishop of Accra. He would have loved to be here, but some other pressing issues have prevented him. He sends his words of encouragement and also gratitude to Arupe Institute for organizing this seminar. And he also brings his special appreciation to all of you who have made it possible to be here. Looking at the topic, Christians, are we citizens or spectators? A short comment. I think from Edmund Beck, we have it that evil thrives because good people fail to act. Yes, we can always point hands at people, and true. But then, change starts always with the individual. I think it's Aristotle who said that the greatest victory is obtained by the victory over the self. Victory over the self. Evils that are going on all around us, we may not be happy about it, certainly. But if we fail to do something, and we must act. And whenever I talk about this, I always remember my early days in the minor seminary. And I went looking for the rector, and I kept knocking at his door. I kept knocking until he came out and said, "We are Christiana." Is that the way to knock? Then he stood out to teach me how to knock as a gentleman. 1, 2, 3. You stop. 1, 2, 3. You stop. 1, 2, 3. If you don't hear anything, you go. Because either the person is not there, or he's there, he's not ready to come. And I said, I thought the Bible says knock. And so I kept knocking. You see, I think as Christians we have to keep knocking, doing the good until the good overcomes. Else we will give up. But a lot of us also fail to do this because we are not equipped. We are not equipped. It's said in Latin, nemo quod dat non habet. Nobody gives what he or she doesn't have. We are not equipped. And that's why opportunities like this, and not only this, even in our various churches and places, especially now, you go at length to organize teachings, opportunities for people to learn, and it's often like this. Not many people or the same people all the time. We need to give ourselves, strive. We want to know. And nobody will put it in our heads. We must have the desire for it, go for it, and use it. I believe the change in every society will start actually from us. And if all of us, the 70% of Ghanaians who are Christians, will start something, I believe there will be a true change to reckon with. We want to thank you once again from the Archbishop, and we pray that efforts like this will bring true change into our country. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm not very good at sitting and speaking, so please pardon me for standing, all of you who sat. It's been a wonderful evening. But as I sat down, I realized that we love to speak politics. And point fingers at those who are not doing the right thing. But we don't realize that each of us is a politician. We may not be in partisan politics, but each of us is a politician because each of us cares about what is happening to our dear country. We are living in a very polarized political situation. But it is we who have made it that way. In the sense that we forget that in a democracy, we have to live practicing unity in diversity. One of the reasons why I love God so much is that He is so awesome, and He uses nature to reveal to us the fact that it is always unity in diversity. When I look at my face, the nose is not like the mouth, nor are the ears like my hair. But they all have to work together to make me a whole person. And this is even what I see. The organs inside me, which give me life, I cannot see. But if they don't function well, if, for example, the leg decides that it is only the mouth which speaks and the leg does not speak, so it's not going to also move, the whole body will be useless. That is why all of us who call ourselves Christians must realize that there is something that each of us can do. Each of us can do something. There are some, like my daughter Jifa, who would do what she has to do through Parliament. But there are only 275 seats. So even if we all wanted to go there, we couldn't. So there's something that can be done there. But he is also playing politics because he speaks to issues in the public space. Father does politics because he speaks about issues concerning the way we should carry ourselves. But he does it also from the pulpit. So all of us have something to do to make our country what we want it to be. Some voices will be loud, other voices will be muted, but we all must play our part. I guess I'm putting it in a very simplistic manner. So let me be a little less simplistic and use the ministry name to try and catch our attention. Salt is very useful. But if you buy salt and you leave it on the shelf, you will never experience its usefulness. The meat you have bought will get rotten and the salt will be on the shelf. And you will complain that the meat is getting rotten. But the salt has not been applied to the meat. Jesus says we are salt if we are Christians. He says we are salt. Our usefulness is undeniable. If there's rottenness going on, then we who are the salt are not permeating. We're not permeating the things that we should permeate to halt it. And it starts in very small ways. In my office, I mean, I'm retired, but I'm just using the example. In my office, if I cannot even speak to a colleague about doing something right, I don't have to point out the wrong, but I can point out the right. If, for example, we are all supposed to be working on a files, and my colleague keeps all the files without doing anything about them, and I can't say, pass the files on, then I have not been sought. I have not been. I don't have to say, why are you not passing the files on? And don't you know this and that? To get the person's back up. But I can use some other means. But it means that I will have to say something. And I haven't gone anywhere. I haven't gone on television. I haven't gone anywhere. I'm sitting in my office. I have colleagues I'm working with. Maybe one likes coming late all the time. Maybe one deliberately does not do the work so that all the work falls on somebody else. We all have a way. And it's in simple ways that change comes. It comes through simple ways. I am the light. It's dark, but I'm the light. But I'm hiding inside there. So, I don't light up the place. But I'm the light. All of us have something to do. Not all of us can go even on demonstration. Not all of us can go on demonstration. But if we firmly believe that what is being demonstrated against is good, maybe we can even send water to those who are doing it, even if physically we don't want to be there. But we can show that we agree with what is happening. That is being a citizen. You don't have to always be in the public space to be a citizen. And I'd like to leave a few points before I sit down. I firmly believe in individual responsibility because it is said that